today to do my book review for my book of the month for December. It was The City and the City by China Mieville. This what came to me in my blind date with a book subscription. They send you a book and it's wrapped up in this brown paper with these little tidbits of information about the plot and the book itself without giving away too much, and I have been pleasantly surprised by, I'd say, almost all of the books I've received through this, and this is my final one of the year. The author did a really good job with the story. I found the writing really nice to read, and the story itself is on the back described as a metaphysical thriller. I feel like it's more like a science fiction-y detective novel, so not super different, but I don't know if I'd really classify it as a thriller or just a detective novel. You follow Theodore Bourlou. He is a extreme crime investigator, and at the beginning of the book itself is about the murder investigation of this woman that Inspector Bourlou finds at the beginning of the book, and kind of the conspiracy surrounding it based on the metaphysical or science fiction aspect of the setting. I found it pretty intriguing, and I'll move forward into my likes and dislikes to give you an idea of what to expect. As normal, this portion is going to be spoiler-free, as will the character portion. I'll do a quick wrap-up and then I'll announce when I'm doing the spoiler parts, just my general book of the month setup now. With that, I'll move on to my 3 likes, the first of which is the metaphysical / science fiction aspect. I really enjoyed it. I found it pretty unique. It's not something I'd run into in my experience, just with how it was written and how it was integrated into the plot as a plot device. It was really interesting, and I feel like the author, China Mieville, did a really good job with it. My second like was the ending. Everybody got the appropriate consequences for their actions, including the protagonist you follow. All of their actions do have consequences, and they play out, I think, really effectively with how the ending was written. And my third plus for this book is the writing style itself. It's very straightforward and very easy to consume, but at no point did I feel like I was getting too few details in terms of the setting. There are a few things that I felt were underexplained, but when they were being explained, the amount of detail you got I found was really appropriate without the language being too flowery. That's all I have to say kind of for my top likes for the story. I'll move on to my dislikes. There are 3 of these as well. The first negative is that I wish certain aspects of the metaphysical parts of the setting were a little bit more well explained. There were just a few times, especially very early on in the book, where I felt I was kind of stumbling around a little bit because I didn't know what was going on. My second dislike is the characters. Not that the characters themselves were necessarily bad, they were just very static, and as someone who really likes character development and a focus on character in a book, this was a negative for me, just because there wasn't a lot of growth with the actions and the outcome of the story. And then my final negative is one I run into sometimes when you get stuff like thrillers or detective novels. It was that the tropes that were used in the book are not ones I particularly care for. I think these were really well done, so I didn't hate it, and I did finish the book with very little issue. However, a few of the tropes are, if you've read it once, you'll see it really early on, and if you're wanting to be held in suspense with some of it, and you've read this specific trope before, I see it and identify it pretty quickly. Not to say that it was, like I said, not to say that these tropes were poorly written. I think they were written very well, and they worked really well into the plot. Just, especially with some of the character tropes and the twist, the kind of twist at the end. And that's all I have to say about my likes and dislikes. I'll move forward to the characters. With the characters, I'm really just going to talk about the main character, Theodore Bourlou. As I mentioned before, he's an extreme crime squad investigator. He's an inspector who, in this book at least, is looking after a murder. I assume that many of the crimes he looks into are of a similar nature or similar badness. While he was, I found him to be pretty well fleshed out in terms of characters. He was flawed. He had, good and bad traits. The only thing I didn't get that I would want out of a character is the character growth. He was pretty static throughout the book. There wasn't a lot of growth through discovery, which I had hoped for, but he was there to fill a role, and he was written to fill that role very well. Within the side characters, there really isn't much to talk about without being too spoilery. But they were really good at helping progress the plot, and I found they were really good plot devices, especially when they were triggering Theodore to recognize and connect some dots, and in terms of the investigation into this woman's murder, and I felt that they were just really good plot devices in that sense. And that's all I have really to say about the spoiler-free portion of this video. I'll do my quick wrap-up, and then I will do another reminder that spoilers are ahead, and then I'll move on to the spoiler book club questions in the chat. So this book for me was about a 3.5 out of 5. I did enjoy parts of it, but other parts I really didn't enjoy, like the tropes that were used was probably one of the biggest, although I also had a little bit of issue with the characters. While well written, they didn't do a lot of growth, and that's something that I find really improves my enjoyment of a book, is if I feel like the character is growing because of the situation around them. That being said, there were a lot of things I really liked. I loved the writing in this book. It was easy to consume, it was very straightforward, and the information, when it was given, was well explained. And despite the characters not getting a lot of growth, I felt they were very well written overall in terms of the stereotypes that they filled. Within this, I also really enjoyed the metaphysical aspect of the setting, although I feel it was a little bit underexplained and fell a little flat because of that. That's all I really have to say about this, and I'll move into the spoiler portion. That is, again, spoilers are ahead now. If you do not want to be spoiled, I would click off this video. I have a bunch of spoiler-free book reviews you can check out, but if you've read this book or don't mind being spoiled for it, feel free to continue listening and or watching. I do 6 kind of spoilery book club questions just to give you my general thoughts about the book without letting myself rant too much. First question is, what was your initial reaction? And honestly, the first chapter of this book, I kind of questioned whether or not I would enjoy it. I knew I would finish it, but I wasn't sure if I'd enjoy it, because detective novels have been a bit hit and miss for me. I've had some that I've enjoyed, like really enjoyed. Like recently I did Magic for Liars, and I found that really interesting. But I've also read things like The Rivers of London, which I found interesting, but it wasn't like mind-blowing. My second question is, what is your favorite chapter or scene? Honestly, I actually really enjoyed all of the parts where they were in Olcama, just because I liked the interactions of Inspector Borlu with his counterpart, and I just liked the contrast of the two kind of cultures and how much more emphasized it was just with how they did their investigations. The third question is, how did the characters change throughout the book? My answer is that they didn't. I talked about this with the characters and in my dislikes. They were just kind of static, so there wasn't a lot of growth, so there was very little change over the course of the novel. Question 4 is, how did you feel about the ending? I actually really liked it. It was a little bit open, so I'm sure that this universe will be explored a little bit more if it has not already been. I really don't know on the status of whether or not that universe has been written about again, but at the same time it was tidy enough that all of the actions that the characters took throughout the novel, especially with Theodore's actions at the end of the Alcama portion, all had really impactful consequences, especially considering the magnitude of like the crimes that were committed or the rules that were bent. My fifth question is, would you read another book by this author? And I would definitely give it a shot. I found his writing to be really enjoyable. It would just definitely have to be a book where I have some interest in what the plot itself is. My final 6th question is, have you read any other books like this? The closest I would say I would get in terms of like overall feel for the read would be The Rivers of London or Magic for Liars. That being said, the metaphysical aspect of the setting was very unique. I haven't run into it anywhere else in my reading experience, and that itself sets the book apart overall from the other kind of detective novels I've read. The closest to, like I said, Magic for Liars, I think by Sarah Gailey, and Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich are probably the closest I come. And with that, I'm just gonna move into my spoiler chat. Because this was such a middle-of-the-road book for me with that kind of 3.5 out of 5 rating, I didn't have anything that I really ranted about, but I didn't have anything that I absolutely adored either. I just have a few little things that I want to talk about, and one is like the metaphysical aspect of the setting. I've mentioned it a number of times in the video already. I know, but I need to get this off my chest. I loved the concept. I found it really unique. I loved the idea of the two cities, and that Breach was such an interesting entity, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. But I loved the way the cities interacted, overlapped. Like, the concept for me was just so interesting, and I was so sad that it fell a little bit flat. Like, it just, something that was so cool, that was like the centerpiece of the story, I just felt like wasn't capitalized on as well as it maybe could have been, or just not as effectively used. I really can't put my finger on what exactly it was, but super cool concept, not like crazy well executed. And then there's the tropes. I'm just going to talk about them briefly. I don't like the trope of, oh look, the guy who's the mastermind behind it all is victimizing himself to throw off the scent. It's like, as soon as you do that, I suspect you. But they did it pretty well. I could live with the fact that he was the one doing it. The other trope I don't really care for is the whole, oh look, there's a conspiracy going on, and then it's a different conspiracy than like the conspiracy nuts think, and the people who are the like actual conspiracy are like, oh, we're gonna keep it this way, it's to our benefit. And it's just, I think conspiracies are kind of silly, but because of how good China Mieville's writing is, it didn't have a super negative impact on me, but these are just tropes I don't care for because I find that very often they can be done poorly, and they're just tropes that were included in this book. I was pleasantly surprised by them, but I still rolled my eyes at them being there. I just want to talk about the ending. I love that Borlu was like absorbed by Breach and like introduced to yet another society, and how that kind of plays and ties back to the other, or the one of the gals that was working at the archaeology site, who's like, oh no, Breach is this third entity, the Orsini entity. Because it's like, yeah, as a conspiracy, that works. It's kind of supported by the facts, but do we really know? We don't. But we know he has a solid future, and that's gotta be enough for us. And I don't know, there's something about the ending that like really hit the right notes for me. It wrapped up the story well, it wrapped up the murder investigation well, and then it just opened up the possibility for so much more to happen. You know that it'd be so easy to go back to Breach and have him doing all this investigation. And because you know what's gonna happen, it doesn't matter whether or not a sequel actually arises, because it's almost like a guaranteed open ending. And I will stop there because I just don't want to rant too much, and I don't really have anything else to talk about. I hope you guys will have a great Christmas. When this video goes up, I think it will be just a few days away. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!